Okay, we're on 128. B. It's the Ihachi, exactly. We're talking about Eivor Menachem being Metama. We learned it from a pasuk. We said that pasuk teaches me something else. That if you shech the treif, it's not Metama. We said no. It says Mina Behema. Kiyamas Mina Behema is teaching me both things. The Gemara asks, Ihachi, it's in the middle of the page. If you see Taisvus Bein Rabbi Akiva, that's right across from it. The line starts with Behema. It's Ihachi, the end of the line. Afila Basarnami. So why does the flesh that come off a living animal also not be Metama? Why is it not Metama? Why it should be Metama? Just like Eivor Menachem. It says Lai Sal Kadaitach, don't think like that. The Tanya was taught in a Braisa. Yachli Basar Perish Menachem Tamei. Maybe basar that comes off flesh that comes off a living animal. We're talking about Jimmy. If the animal dies, so it's called an avela. It wasn't shechted. If you cut a limb off a living animal, so that limb is called Eivor Menachem. It's a limb off a living animal. We learned that Eivor Menachem also gives off tumah like an avela. But let's say you cut flesh off a living animal, not a whole bone, not a whole limb. So we're saying maybe that should also be tamei. So we're saying Talmud Leimer v'chiyamas mina behema. No, that it's not tamei. Just flesh isn't tamei. It needs to be a whole limb. Mami s'sheina isachalipin. Why? Because just like death, when the animal dies, it can never come back to life naturally. So afkol sheina isachalipin. Also, the Eivor Menachem, it can't regenerate. It can't regenerate. But flesh regenerates, so flesh doesn't count. Divrei Rabbi Yosi. It's actually on the side it says it's supposed to be Rabbi Yosi Eily. It's a different Rabbi Yosi. Herschel would make a big deal about that. Rabbi Yosi is Nimukai Yimai. Rabbi Yosi ben Chalafta. Rabbi Yosi Eily, I don't know what it says about him regarding the halacha. Oh, thank you. Beautiful. But so Rabbi Yosi Eily was a friend or a student of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says differently. They're almost the same, but just a nuance. He says, Rabbi Akiva Imer Behema. It's an animal. It says, Kiyamas Mina Behema. Ma Behema Gidim Atzames. What's an animal? An animal has bones and sinews. Afkol Gidim Atzames. Also, an Eivor Menachem, a limb off a living animal that's going to be tummy, also needs to have the bones and the sinews. Rabbi Imer, Rabbi, a generation later, he says, no, a little different. Behema, ma behema, basar gidim v'atzamis. What's an animal? Flesh, bones, and sinews. Afkol basar gidim v'atzamis. It needs to be flesh, bone, and sinews, but it can't just be flesh itself. The Gemara asks, Ma yekabein Rabbi le Rabbi Akiva? What was the difference? We say these opinions sound so similar. What's the difference between Rabbi and Rabbi Akiva? The Gemara answers, Ikabeinayo arkuva. Rabbi Akiva said that an Eivor Menachem, a limb off a living animal, to be tamei, it says it needs to have bones and sinews. Rabbi says it needs to have flesh, bones, and sinews. What's the difference? The difference is either the lower leg or the knee joint, whatever akuva means. That's a part of the animal that it doesn't have any flesh. So it's a full part of the animal, it's full aver, but there's no bones, there's only bones and sinews with no flesh. So according to Rabbi Akiva, that's going to be tamei. According to Rabbi, no, it needs to have flesh to be tamei. So that one part of the animal would be a difference, would be a machlekes Rabbi and Rabbi Akiva. What about ben Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yosi Eily? Between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yosi Eily, that Rabbi Yosi Eily says that it can't regenerate. Only something that doesn't regenerate is considered tamei if it's cut off a living animal. Rabbi Akiva says bones and sinews. What's the difference? Sounds like the same thing. Bones and sinews don't regenerate. Ma yekabeinayo. What's the difference? Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa says kol yavinipsa v'sayim yekabeinayo. Very interesting. According to Rabbi Yosi Eily, the kidneys, if they're cut, if they're taken out, won't regenerate. It doesn't need to be a bone. According to Rabbi Akiva, it needs to be a bone. And the same with the lips. If the lips are cut off, they won't regenerate. So it doesn't need to be a bone. So Rabbi Yosi Eily has this extra chumrah, this extra sort of tumah that will apply to things even that don't have a bone. Rabbi Akiva wouldn't say that. Tanya nami gabi shratzim. This was also taught by shratzim. Now here we're going to
say liver, for example.
Liver
because it could be the liver does regenerate.
Does regenerate.
You take the whole liver?
No, if the whole thing, no. You're right. You're right.
Liver in general becomes cirrhotic, scarred, but liver cells actually can regenerate if not too much damage. They used to think they couldn't. Most don't. Most they drink too much. Get cirrhosis.
So, we've mentioned before cutting off like a limb off a lobster or something. It didn't seem to be Aver Menachai. That's what we learned before, but over here we're going to see a little different, at least by a sheretz, that a limb off a sheretz also has the status of Aver Menachai. It was also taught by Shrotzim, Kai Gavna similarly. Yachol Basar Perish Min Shrotzim Yetame, a sheretz is these 8 creatures that when they die they give up impurity. What about the flesh off a sheretz? The meat off a lizard or something, or a frog, or whatever those things are. A mouse, I don't know. Talmud Leimer b'maisam. No, it says in their death. Only when they're death they give off tumah. Ma misa she'enai sechalipin, afkol she'enai sechalipin, the Rabbi say Eily. It needs to be something that doesn't regenerate. And flesh regenerates. Rabbi Kiva Imer sheretz. It's exactly the same as before, but it's just about a sheretz instead of an animal. Ma sheretz gidim atzamis, just like a sheretz has bones and sinews. Afkol gidim atzamis. That's Rabbi Kiva's opinion. Rabbi, which is Rabbi Danasi, he says, sheretz, ma sheretz basa gidim atzamis, afkol basa gidim atzamis. It needs to be the flesh, bones, and sinews. That was Rabbi's opinion before as well. It's just a repeat of the same machlekes, just by a sheretz.
But they learn it from different psukim.
Yeah, different psukim.
Very, very important.
Bein Rabbi le Rabbi Akiva, between Rabbi and Rabbi Akiva Kabenayu, the difference is Arkuva, that knee joint. That would be the difference. And Bein Rabbi Akiva le Rabbi Eily Maya Kabenayu. What's the difference between them? Amar Rav Papa Kuli v'nipsavasayim, the kidneys and the lips. That would be the difference between Rabbi Eily, because the kidneys and the lips don't regenerate either, even though there's no bone.
Well,
Kabenayu.
we just did that.
just
Except
did
now
that.
we're doing it with different
With different
Yeah.
psukim
I just want to make sure I didn't have
on the
lapse.
sheretz.
Yeah.
On the sheretz.
No, it's not a senior moment. No.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
No, time
Still
isn't.
there. Still
Don't be
there,
fooled
doctor.
by the gray hair.
No, because there was one.
Yeah.
Did I all of a sudden flip the pages?
Don't worry
here?
about it, man.
The time doesn't only go in one direction.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Oh my gosh, don't have it going.
Okay. B'tzricha. And it's necessary to have both of these, even though they seem to be quite similar. It's necessary to say both. Tiyashmin and behema, because if it would only tell me this halacha by an animal, this machlekes, then I would have said that the flesh of an animal, of a living animal, isn't metame. I would have said, explain. Hainu taima, delay metame, mechayim. Why isn't it metame? Mishum delay metame kadasha, because it doesn't have a sheretz is metame, even if the bone of the sheretz is the size of a lentil, very, very small amount. Usually, on a nevela, it needs to be a kazayas. So sheretz is much less. I would have said the fact that an animal is not metam, it's because it has a much larger measurement. But by a sheretz, it is metam. If it didn't tell me these laws by a sheretz, I would have said it's only by an animal that you have this no tuma status on flesh. Aval sheretz to metame b'kadasha. Sheretz is more strict. Eimal atame mechayim. Maybe the flesh is also tamim. V'iyashmin and sheretz. And if it would only tell me sheretz, that a sheretz is not tamei, then I would have said maybe I could have thought that for sure the animal shouldn't be tamei. But no, mishum delay metame b'masa. Sheretz has one leniency. That leniency is that if you don't actually touch the sheretz, but you just lift it up, like with on a board or something, you lift it up. You don't actually contact with the sheretz, but you lift it up. It doesn't give off tuma. However, by a nevela, so by a sheretz, it's like metam mechayim. Aval behema, the metam b'masa, that's stricter. I would have thought emet metam mechayim, because if you lift up a nevela, even if you don't actually have contact with it, but you just raised it up, so it does give off tuma. So I would have said that by an animal, the flesh would also give off tuma. So Shrichas needs to tell me both, because each one I wouldn't have understood that halacha to the other one because of these differences. Okay.
That's funny, because in general, you don't want to touch your sheretz. You move it with a piece of wood or something like that.
Right.
So,
But in the Nevela, I would all do the same.
but an
Sometimes
animal,
these
you
animals
usually-
die in the yard or something. I think to take a bag and you inside out. It's like this whole thing.
Exactly how you do it.
It's
to take a possum.
and then you feel
Or a
like gross
hamster.
afterwards.
Pet hamster.
A hamster is flushed down the toilet.
Touch it.
Just kidding. Just kidding. That's goldfish, right?
Alligators. Tanu Rabbanan.
Urban tale.
Start in a brisa. Hachaytech kezayis basar me'ever menachai. Okay, this is interesting. There's a limb already cut off a living animal. The limb is already severed. And the animal is possibly still alive, whatever. But this limb was severed. You go along, or someone goes along, and cuts a kezayis of flesh off the limb. Now, a limb off a living animal is metame, just like a nevela. The flesh is not metame. So you've removed a piece of it. What's the status now? What is this status now? When you remove this piece, the flesh is not tummy as nevela. The flesh is just food. So it goes like this. If first you cut it, you cut the flesh off, but you didn't have any intention of eating, of serving this to someone to eat. When you cut it off. After you cut it off, you decided, no, you know what, I'm going to serve this as food to a non-Jew. So it's tahar. Why? Because it's not nevela, because it's just flesh. It's not aver menachai. It doesn't have the status of nevela because it's not. It doesn't have the aver menachai type of nevela because it's only the flesh. The flesh isn't matam. We just learned that. It doesn't have tumas oichlin because when you cut it off, it wasn't food yet. It's food now, but right now it didn't touch anything. So something has to touch it to make it tummy after it's food. But let's say the opposite. Let's say chishavalav. Let's say you decided that it is food. You are going to serve it, so it becomes food even before you remove it. Then you cut it. So as you're cutting it,
You're thinking.
so it's already food. So you're cutting it. It's touching the limb while you're cutting it. It's there. It's the inside, right? It's touching. So it's getting through contact. It's becoming tummy as the tumma of food, tumas oichlin. The contact with the nevela. It's not nevela, but it's aver menachai, which has a status of nevela. Okay. So there's a difference of when you decided this is food. If you decided it's food before you cut it, then it's tameh, because
Why would you be cutting it off though, if you're not going to eat it? Just cut it.
I don't know. Maybe you wanted
Crazy
to use
people.
maybe you wanted to use the bone for something. I don't know.
No, just cut it by accident.
Or just cut it by
That's
accident.
But then you didn't have a thought.
Well,
Right.
you
Well,
said
then
you thought
afterwards-
it wasn't for using
Right.
for food.
Then afterwards you see the meat here and you say, you know, let me serve this to the guy.
Still a good piece.
Delicious.
In plain point. Like the fire.
He can't serve. It's usher, I guess, to serve to a guy. Rabasi lo yala bei midrasha. Rabasi didn't go to the Bais Medrash. And Ashkechela Rab Zera, but he found Rab Zera, and he says, Amalei, my Amr bei midrasha.
I'm curious which Bais Medrash this was.
I think, because it says Rabbi Asi, both of them, I think Rabasi was once in Bavel as well, and Rab Zera was also once in Bavel, but because it says Rabbi Asi and Rabbi Zera, I think it's after they went to Eretz Yisrael, and it's probably Rabbi Yechanan's or Rabbi Vo, or whoever took over after Rabbi Yechanan in Tveria. So Amalei, my Amr bei Midrasha. What did they say in the Bais Medrash? I don't know why. All of these, we have several Gemaras where the person didn't go to the Bais Medrash. They're all
We had a great story come out of it.
when was that? But
I'm saying that always when they don't go to the Bais Medrash, we learn the great halacha.
So, but they're always on the bottom line of the Gemara.
Oh.
I don't know why. The other one was on the bottom line over here somewhere.
Maybe
printing
that's
stuff.
the Ganai. Hey, you don't show up, you end up on the bottom.
So, Amalei Mayam Bei Midrash says, what did they say in the Beis Medrash when I wasn't there? Amalei May Kashalach. I don't know if that's actually in the Girsa. It's maybe if this is part of the text, and he's saying, what was your question? So Amalei, he says, my question is, Diktani Chishev V'achikach Hatachi Tamei. He says, I don't understand that halacha. If someone thinks about that, it should be food, and then he cuts it, so it's already food, and it's in contact with the Aver Menachem, with the limb. Talking about the limb was severed already, but you're cutting the flesh off it. So it's in contact with with the other larger part of the limb. So it's considered tamei because it was food already. It's tamei as tumas eichlin, the tumah of food. The problem is tumas beis starmi. It's tumas beis starmi. We have a rule that if it's not recognizable, the contact, if it's not visible, the contact, because here you're severing it. As you're severing it, it needs to be not that it's contact in areas that you can't see. It needs to be contact that two separate things, and one touches the other. Here you're severing it. Yes, it's contact, but all the contact is in the inside. It's hidden. But tumas beis starmi like metama. That's the rule. So here, when you're cutting it off, you think it's having contact. It's not having. That's not considered a contact that gives off tumah. Amalei, he says to Mafli Lididi Kashali. I think this is Reb Zera
says so.
Reb Zera says to Reb Asi that I had this question as well. I don't know if he's saying last night or whatever. V'she'ilti l'Rabbi bar Mamal, and I asked Rabbi bar Mamal v'Amalei, and he explained to me that Hamani Reb Meir he. This is the opinion of Reb Meir. And you'll probably remember this. That says tumas beis starmi is mitama. If you remember when an animal was giving birth and the limb was sticking out, so we said that limb has a status of nevela, and then you shechted the mother, and the question was, what about the fetus inside? Did they give tuma from the limb to the fetus inside?
But the fetus inside was, I'm sorry, Ben Pekua. I thought we could eat
No,
it.
we're talking about tumah.
Yeah,
because I had a limb outside.
But that limb that has a status of nevela, Reb Meir holds, is considered touching the fetus inside.
Right.
But you could eat the fetus.
You can eat it.
So how could
You can eat it, but it has tumas maga. It has tumas eichlin. Food that's tummy.
And
You
what
can eat
about
it.
that limb? Could you eat that limb also?
No, that limb no one holds. You can eat.
Right, no.
That limb.
That's
So
the
that
problem.
limb is considered nevela. But Reb Meir held that the limb had contact with the fetus, even though it's not a visible contact. It's a hidden contact. It's the contact of the inside that you don't see.
What I was asking before is, Rabbi bar Mamal doesn't. I mean, is that a name that's?
Here's common.
He's mentioned. Why wouldn't he ask? Who's the Rosh Hashiva in the Beis Medrash? Why would he ask somebody? That's why I asked where are they? There should be a famous Rosh Hashiva that Reb Zera goes to see.
Let me just
So instead of asking the Rosh Hashiva, he asked Rabbi bar Mamal why.
Maybe he just
Well,
met
don't
him-
you think he would go ahead and ask the Rosh
he
Hashiva the
met him in
question?
the street? Or he was
But
embarrassed
we're
because
talking
he didn't show up?
They're talking over here that
I ain't going to the Rosh Hashiva.
No, it's the other one.
He asked him.
It's the other one.
Asked him, "What did you learn in the Beis Medrash?" And he said, "This is what we learned."
Yeah.
So why in the Beis Medrash wouldn't you go to the Rosh Hashiva and ask him?
Because you didn't show up day before. Hello,
No. We're talking about Reb Zera, who was in the Beis Medrash. Ravasi wasn't. He goes to Reb Zera and he says, "I missed yesterday going to the Beis Medrash. What did you do in the Beis Medrash?" So he says, "Do you have any questions? Maybe that's what you're referring to." He says, "I have this question about Chishev Haga Chatmenta." So he says, "I had the same question, and I asked Rabbi bar Mamal, why did he ask Rabbi bar Mamal? Why didn't he ask the Rosh Hashiva?"
It's a good question.
I'm saying usually if
Let
you're
me look up what's significant about Rabbi bar Mamal. I have to look that
All
up
right.
and know this.
I'm
I remember
curious,
he's not
yeah.
even on the chart. So
I was just curious why, Sorry.
So Rabbi bar Mamal responded that it's Reb Meir. Here we already have something interesting with Rabbi bar Amar Lei. So Rabasi says back, Zimin Sagian Amr Kamai. I heard this already from Rabbi bar Mamal. But I already told him that Shani Leila Reb Meir ben Tumad Bay Hechsher ben Tumad Lei Bay Hechsher. In other words, I don't accept this answer because, you see, in that instance, by the limb,
It didn't need hechsher.
over there it says that it didn't need hechsher. The fetus doesn't need hechsher.
Just
Is
once
it because
it's
of
out.
the shchita? I think because the shchita of the mother covers the animal, covers the fetus as well. So there was no, or maybe that would be considered hechsher. Yeah.
Yeah, that the mother was
The mother's
shechted,
shechted,
therefore the
fetus has
was automatically hechsher
hechsher.
for tumah.
However, by us, we're dealing with something else. We're dealing with a limb that's dangling, or a limb that was cut off.
It doesn't need
The
hechsher.
Mishnah.
The cutting
So
off
it
is
says
that.
clearly tzricha hechsher. In our Mishnah it says even rabasar medalim bebehema etamatim maseichlim kan tzrichen hechsher. And here achitak kazayis basar meivim
But the
menachai.
chituch is the hechsher.
No, it needs to get wet. It needs
But
to
it
get
says
wet.
chishe v'achar chotchoy tamei without a hechsher.
Yeah, so but that's a problem because you need hechsher. That's what he's asking. Notice Rabasi is going back. He says, I don't understand how Chishavachach is Tamei. It's Tumas Beis Starim. So they tell him, Tumas Beis Starim is Tamei anyway. He says, I understand that Tumas Beis Starim is Tamei, but that's when there's Hechsher isn't required. But over here, Hechsher is required.
So the hechsher is the thought.
No, Hechsher is getting wet. And even though it's the thought came first. The thought came first that it's food. So yes, it's food. The question is that it needs to get touched. So he's saying Tumas Beis Starim. Tumas Beis Starim is not considered touching. He says, well, according to Rabbi Meir it is. He says, yeah, according to Rabbi Meir it is if it was already wet, but here it wasn't wet. So Amar Rava,
That's just the prerequisite.
you see, Rava's answer you'll see.
Getting what?
Amar Rava, umay kushi dimla b'shehuchsha. How do you know it never got wet? Maybe it got wet before. Before the whole story of cutting it off, it got wet.
But then it's not considered hechsher. Because it was hechsher in the time that it can be mekabel tumah.
No, maybe after he thought that it was food. After he thought it was food.
And after he cut it?
No, before he cut it.
So, but that wouldn't make a difference.
No, he thought it was food.
Right.
So now it's already considered tumas eichlin. Now when he cuts it, it's considered that maga, that touching is already making it food. You see, it has already a tumah beforehand of tumas ever menachai, which is tumas nevela. The only thing is that when you separate it, it loses that tumas nevela. Question is does it get that lower status of tumas eichlin, tumah of food? So he said, well, he thought that he was gonna serve it, so it's already food, and now it's contacted by the original limb, which is nevela, and we're talking about maybe that it got wet. Yeah, so it's going to fit with according to Rabbi Meir that says Tumas Beis Starim works if it got wet. Amalei Rabba Barav Chanan l'Rava. Rabba Barav Chanan says to Rava, Lama li hechsher. Why do you even need hechsher? Hari metamatem achamura agavaviv. You see, we had this halacha like this. We said that grain needs to get wet before it's mekabel tumah. Right? Al kol zera, kol zera zerua sheizureh. All the grain, in order for it to, if water goes on the grain, then that's when it's, then the grain is susceptible to tumah. But things that are going to give off a more severe tumah, they don't need to get wet. So, for example, nevelas oif tar. If a kosher bird dies without shechita, that is susceptible to tumah even if it doesn't get wet. Why? Because if the person swallows it, it makes him that's nevela. So that food doesn't need to get wet even if it's tumah because of food as well. There's two types of tumah there. Tumah because it touched something. It's food that touched like a sheretz, and it's also tumah if you swallow it. So he says because it can give you a more severe sort of tumah, the lesser tumah doesn't need to be prepared, doesn't need the hechsher. So here we're asking that right now, before you cut it off, this has a more severe tumah on it. It has tumas nevela. Now you cut the flesh off, it's not tumas nevela. Now it's only tumas eichlin. Tumas eichlin needs hechsher, but we're going to say that because it has a more severe tumah, it shouldn't need hechsher. Just like by nevela seiftar, which has a more severe tumah, doesn't need hechsher. The hechsher is only to prepare something to become tummy, to make it susceptible, if it only has a lesser tumah. But here the tumah is much more severe, it shouldn't need any hechsher. And it has that already. Amalei responds, Kishishimish might say it's shimish. Right here, as it's attached to the limb, we're not considering it as food. Considering it like wood. Like, for example, the bone that's attached to the flesh is also can impart tumah. So that's what this meat is like. This meat is like the bone, like that's attached to the flesh. It's just acting as wood, as a handle, but it's not actually tumas eichlin. You see, by the bird, that was food that has two possible ways of giving off tumah. Either one is because it came in contact with the sheretz, or the other one is because you swallowed it. Both of them are food, and we say that it doesn't need to get wet to get this other sort of tumah. But over here, the first tumah is tumas nevela. It's nothing to do with food. So why does it give off tumah? Because it's like a piece of wood that's attached to nevela, which is like a bone that's attached. And then I have the other tumah, which is food. That's a new tumah. For that tumah, it needs to get wet. That was Rabbi's answer, that it needs to get wet. We're explaining it. Amar Abaya, we're going to give a bunch of examples for this, where we're going to say that although there's a more severe tumah, it still needs to get wet because the more severe tumah has no association with food. This is very relevant. One's wondering, what do you have to get rid of on Pesach? Let's say someone makes a chair out of dough.
Whoa.
So,
Puffy chair.
yeah, well, what about, people do this, they do art with macaroni. Kids,
true.
they would do, and they spray it. Or there's different that's a little different. But here, there's certain things that become useful, that the dough in it is useful.
If you get really hungry, you just take a bite.
So if you designate it as something useful, so it's betela, it's not considered chametz. It's a leniency. And tumas alav deraisa. Now a chair has special tumas. Chair, if a zav or a zava sit on a chair, tumas moishav or medras, so it becomes tamei. So Abaya says it can't be a deraisa. The tumah of this chair can't be a deraisa. Why? Bisal kedaitach deraisa. Because if it would be a deraisa, the sitting on this chair, we always had a problem. Food is never tamei unless it gets wet. Now I'm going to introduce a problem that if it could reach a more severe sort of tumah, then it doesn't need to get wet. So I'm going to tell you, guess what? Every type of food, you could sit on it. And it could become very seriously tamei. This food should never need to get wet. It must be that sitting on food is not a real tumah. It's not a deraisa tumah. Sitting on this chair that's made out of dough is not a... So matzina loichman shematam tumah chamura. Why does food ever need to get wet? If you would turn it into a chair, it would reach a much bigger tumah. It should never need to get wet. The Gemara answers, because shimish might say shimish. No, the same answer we said before. Yes, it has a real tumah. But that's not a tumah that's associated with food. As food, it needs to get wet. That's a different sort of thing. This has no connection to food. It's just acting as a piece of wood. Amar Abai, another example. Someone brings an offering to an Avodah Zarah. That offering gives off tumah like a dead body. Even in a tent, it gives off tumah. He says, Tumas alav deraisa. Abai says, you can't say that tumah is deraisa. Why? If the tumah of this Avodah Zarah, this offering to Avodah Zarah is a real tumah, so then matzino leichlin shemetam tumah chamura. Then food has a much more severe tumah. And why does food have to get wet? Anything that has a severe tumah doesn't have to get wet. You've just taken away that whole halacha of getting food wet by saying, well, if you turn it into an idol, or turn it into a sacrifice to an idol, an offering to an idol, it's going to be more severely tummy. The Gemara says no. That is kishishimish might say shimish. Here it's a little different. Here we're saying not that it's a handle for something, or it's just a vessel. Here we're saying that it becomes like wood. Because it's asur bahana, it has no, because it's forbidden to have benefit from, it becomes so useless that it's just considered like wood. It's not considered food. Amar Abai, Abai says, tries again. This is if we take a piece of dough and you attach it to a crack on a bowl or something. So you're using this dough to seal some sort of crack on it. So we say that this seal, this dough, is considered like the bowl. It becomes part of the vessel. And it can become tummy without getting wet. So the problem is that if food can get tummy without getting wet, then food should never need to get wet, because anything that could reach a more severe tumma, like tumas kalim is a more severe tumma than tumas eichlin, so it shouldn't need to get wet. So we just ruined the whole halacha of the food. So it says, Rabbi says it must be tumas and lav daraisa. It can't be that it's a daraisa, because the isal kadaitach daraisa. Because if it is a daraisa, matzina leichel shematam tumma chamura. We're finding food that has a more severe tumma. The Gemara answers the very obvious answer. Because shimish might say it's shimish. When it's attached to the bowl, it's not considered food. So food needs to get wet, and this doesn't. Amalei Rav Papa l'Rava. Rav Papa, the student of Rava, he says, Hadatanya, this that it was taught in the Brisa. Chaylev Nevela, we had this a day or two ago. Hadatanan I have on the side. It was taught in the Mishnah. The chaylev of a dead kosher animal. It would have been kosher if it would have been shechter, but it died. Now, you're allowed to do anything with this. You're allowed to give it to a non-Jew. It's not tamei as nevela. Only the animal is tamei. Only the flesh is tamei as nevela. The chaylev is not tamei. Now, so if you're going to, it's not nevela, but is it food? So it depends where it is. If you're in the city, then they eat every part of the animal. But if you're in the village, they don't eat every part of the animal, because there's just a few people. When they slaughter an animal, there's enough meat to go around. They don't have to take it apart. They don't have to eat all of that stuff. So if you're going to consider it food and you're in a village, tzarich machshava. You have to think about serving it. It's not automatic. The hechsher and rosa has to get wet. So Tumasa Yagav Kulya Lav Deraisa. Now the fact is that this fat is covering the kidney. Now the fact that if it's the kidney is a nevela, it's touching the kidney. So we're saying that it shouldn't be.
All the was touching the kidney.
A large part of it is touching. So we should say that it's not considered a daraisa. Why? Disal kadaitach daraisa. If it is a daraisa, then matzino la'ichlem shematam chamura.